Good afternoon, gentle listeners. It's Erin, your librarian storyteller for the day. Welcome back to Legend and Lore, where every week I'll be telling you a handful of myths, folk tales, and fairy tales that come from different cultures from all around the world, from Japan to South Africa, from Greece to Polynesia. This week I'll be regaling you with some Celtic legend and lore, originating from Iron Age, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, before the conversion into Christianity. While the religion itself did not survive the conversion, the stories did, and they were passed through a series of ancestors until the Middle Ages, where they were finally put into writing. Again, many of these stories survived, even if the gods themselves did not, and they are what I'm going to be regaling you with today. Now make sure you stick around, because at some point in the video I will be giving out a keyword to enter into your summer reading account. If you participate and earn enough key points through these keywords, you just might win a fabulous prize. Well, with that PSA out of the way, let's get started. Our first story comes from the Mabinogion, which are the medieval Welsh tales, the oldest and most well-known of Welsh mythology. The manuscripts, when they were originally found, are about 700 years old, though the stories themselves are much older. They contain strange men and women that at one point were considered Celtic gods, and actions that can only be exemplified to deities. I will be starting with the first branch of these stories, Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed. Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, was lord of 7 regions. While he was at Arbroath, one of his chief courts, he thought it would be good to go hunting in the part of his realm called Glencoe. So that evening he set out from Arbroath and reached a place called Penlwyn Diarrwea, and there he remained overnight. The next day, Pwyll got up with the dawn and came into the woods of the Glencoe, and there he let loose his hounds. He sounded his horn and began the hunt. Pwyll followed his hounds so far into the forest that he lost touch with his friends, and as he listened to the baying of his own pack of hounds, he heard the baying of another pack that sounded different from his own, and this other pack was coming towards his own. Pwyll could see a clearing in the woods, a flat meadow, and as his hounds reached the edge of the meadow, he could see a stag running in front of the strange hounds. Near the middle of the meadow, these hounds caught the stag and threw it to the ground. Pwyll looked at the color of the strange pack of hounds, without even bothering to look at the stag. And out of all the hounds he had ever seen, he had never seen hounds that were the same color as these. Their coats were shining white, and their ears were red. And as their white coats shone, so their red ears gleamed. Pwyll walked up to these strange hounds. He drove them off the stag and began to feed his own hounds on the meat. While he was busy feeding the hounds, Pwyll saw a knight ride up after the strange hounds on a large dapple-gray horse. He had a horn hanging from his neck, and he wore a hunting cloak of light-colored material. The knight came up to Pwyll and said to him, "Lord, I know who you are, but I am not going to greet you." "Is that so?" said Pwyll. "Perhaps you're so noble you don't have to greet me." "You can be sure," said the knight, "that it's not my nobility that prevents me from greeting you." "Then what prevents you, my lord?" asked Pwyll. "God knows," he said. "It's your impertinence." "What impertinence have you seen in me, my lord?" asked Pwyll. "I never saw a greater lack of courtesy in anyone," said the knight, "than that you should drive away the hounds that killed the stag, and set your own hounds upon it. Although I am not going to avenge myself upon you, I'll dishonor you as if you had killed 100 stags." "Now, my lord," said Pwyll, "if I've wronged you, I'll buy your friendship." "How?" he asked. "According to your rank, whoever you are. I'm a crowned king in the country I come from." "My lord," said Pwyll, "good day to you. From what country do you come?" "From the other world," he replied. "I am Arwen, king of the other world." "My lord," he said, "in what way can I win your friendship?" "This is the way," said Arwen. "There's a man whose kingdom lies next to mine, and he is always causing me trouble. His name is King Halfdan. If you will put an end to his enmity, a thing you can easily do, I will be your friend." "I will do this gladly," said Pwyll. "And now tell me how I'll do it." "Like this," the king replied. "I'll be your good friend and arrange for you to take my place in the other world, and I will give you the most beautiful woman you've ever seen to live with. I'll make you look exactly like me, so that no servant or officer or anyone who has ever met me will guess that I am not there. Things will remain like this for a year and a day. Then we'll meet here again." "Good," said Poole, "but if I am to be in your kingdom for a year, how will I find this man you speak of?" "I have arranged," said the king, "to meet him at the ford 1 year from tonight. You will be there looking exactly like me. Strike him only once, he cannot live after being struck, and however much he may beg you to strike him a second time, do not agree to it. However many blows I gave him, he'd still be able to put up a good fight as well as ever on the following day." "Good," said Poole, "but what shall I do with my own realm?" "I'll arrange things so that no one in your realm can tell the difference between us," said Arwen. "I'll go there in your place." "I gladly agree," said Poole. "And now I'll set out for your kingdom." "Nothing will hinder you on your way to my kingdom," said the king. "I'll come with you to show you the way." Arwen accompanied Poole until he could see the court and the houses where Arwen's people lived. "There you are," said the king. "The court and kingdom are yours. Now proceed to the court. Everyone there will know you, and you will see their way of doing things. You'll get used to it." Poole went on to the court. He could see the bedchambers and halls and other rooms, and the most splendid buildings that anyone had ever seen. Then he went to the hall to change his clothes, and squires and young men came to assist him. Each greeted him in turn, and 2 knights came out to take off his hunting garb and dress him in silk clothes of a golden colour. The hall was made ready. Poole looked at the hall guard and the other soldiers as they came into the hall, the fairest, most splendid company that anyone had ever seen, and he saw the queen with them, the most beautiful woman that anyone had ever laid eyes upon. She was wearing a silk dress the colour of bright gold. Inside the hall everyone went to wash, and then took their places at table. The queen sat on one side of Poole, and an earl, as he imagined, sat on the other. Poole and the queen began to talk, and while he was talking, with her he thought he had never met a woman less pretty or more gracious. They spent the time eating and drinking and listening to songs, and of all the courts that Poole had seen on earth, this had been the greatest spread of food and drink, the greatest abundance of gold vessels and priceless gems. So the time came for them to go to bed, and off they went, Poole and the queen. As soon as they got into bed, Poole turned to face his side of the bed so that he had his back to the queen. The next day they were affectionate and friendly to each other. But however affectionate they were during the day, every night was exactly the same as the first night. Poole spent the year hunting, listening to songs, eating, and talking with his friends until the night of the combat. And that night everyone in the kingdom of the other world thought as much about the combat as did Poole himself. Poole made his way to the meeting place, accompanied by his noblemen. As soon as he reached the ford across the river, a knight stood up and said, "Now, men, listen. This combat is between 2 kings. Each claims the other's land. All you can do is stand to one side and let them decide it." At this, the 2 kings rode to the middle of the ford to meet one another. Poole struck Halfdan such a blow on the boss of his shield that it split into 2 halves, and his armor smashed, and Halfdan himself was thrown to the ground, a lance and an arm length behind the rump of his horse. He was mortally wounded. "Ah, my lord," said Halfdan, "what right have you to kill me? I wanted nothing of yours. I know of no cause for you to kill me, but for God's sake, finish what you have begun." "My lord," said Poole, "maybe I'll regret doing what I've done to you, but ask someone else to kill you. I'm not going to do it." "Loyal men," said Halfdan, "take me from here. I'm at death's door. I can no longer look after you." "And my noblemen," said Poole, "take counsel. Decide which of these men ought to be my vassals." "Lord," said the nobleman, "they should all be your vassals, for there is no other king in the other world but you." "Good," said he. "I will receive whoever submits himself to me, and whoever does not will be forced by the sword to do so." Hearing this, all Halfdan's men yielded to Poole, and he took control of the kingdom. By noon on the following day, he was recognized everywhere as the ruler of 2 kingdoms, his own and that of Halfdan. That evening, Poole rode out to Glencoe in his appointed meeting. Arwen, king of the other world, was already waiting for him. The two were happy to see each other. "Indeed," said Arwen, "may God reward you for your friendship. I have heard about it." "Fine," said Poole. "When you reach your own country, you'll see what I've done for you." "May God reward you for everything you've done for me," said Arwen. Then Arwen gave back to Poole, Prince of Dyfed, his own shape and appearance, and he himself resumed his shape and appearance. Then Arwen rode towards his court in the other world, and it gave him great joy to see his people and his guard again, for he had not seen them for a year. But they had not missed him, and for them there was nothing new in his return. He passed that day in complete happiness, sitting and talking with his wife and noblemen, until it was time for everyone to go to bed. Arwen went to bed, and his wife followed him. The first thing he did was talk to her, and turn to her. She had not been used to this for a year, and she thought, "What's this? Why is he different tonight from the way he's been for a year? And she thought for a long time. Arwen woke from a short sleep and spoke to his wife once, twice, 3 times, but he received no answer. Why won't you talk to me? He asked. Well, she answered, I've not talked this much with you in this bed for a year. What? He said. We've talked a lot together. I swear, she said, for a year from last night, from the moment we'd go to bed, I've had no warmth from you, no words, nor your face to me, not to mention anything else. Then Arwen thought, Indeed, I have had the friendship of a strong and honest man. Then he said to his wife, My lady, don't be annoyed now, but, as God's my witness, I've not slept with you for a year from last night. And then he told her the whole story. Indeed, she said, you found yourself a true friend since he withstood a temptation like that and been faithful to you. Yes, indeed, my lady, he said. I was thinking about that while I was silent. And no wonder, she said. Meanwhile, Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, returned to his own realm and country. He soon asked the important people of the country how his government during the last year had compared to the previous years. Lord, they said, your courtesy was never greater. You were never so kind, never so generous, and things have never been in better order than they've been this last year. As God's my witness, he said, you should thank the man who has been here with you. This is what happened. And then Pwyll told them the whole story. Fine, Lord, they said. Thank God you enjoyed that kind of friendship, and the kind of government we've had this year. You won't take it away from us. I won't, by God, said Pwyll. From then on, Pwyll and Arwen began to strengthen their friendship, with one sending the other horses and hounds and hawks and whatever precious thing he thought would please the other. And because Pwyll went to the other world that year and ruled there so successfully, and made 2 kingdoms won through his bravery, he came to be called Pwyll, King of the Other World. Now, once upon a time, Pwyll was in Arbereth, one of his chief courts. A feast had been prepared, and many people were there with him. After the first sitting had eaten, Pwyll got up to stretch his legs, and he walked towards the top of a hill above a court called the Throne of Arbeth. My lord, said one of the courtiers, the remarkable thing about the throne is this. If a nobleman once sits on it, he'll not be able to leave without one of 2 things happening. Either he'll be injured and hurt, or he'll see a wonder. I'm not afraid of being injured and hurt amongst as many people as this, said Pwyll, but it would please me greatly to see a wonder. I'll go and sit on the throne. So Pwyll went to sit on it, and as everyone was sitting there, they saw a woman riding a grey-white horse many hands high, a woman wearing silk the color of bright gold. She was coming along the road that passed by the throne. The horse seemed to move quite slowly, without varying its speed, until it was almost opposite the throne. Ah, said Pwyll, do either of you recognize the horsewoman? No, my lord, they said. I want someone to go and meet her, and find out who she is, he said. So a man got up and stepped forward, but as he came to meet her, she went past him. He pursued her as quickly as any man could on foot, but the greater his haste, the further she was from him. And when the man realized it was not worth his chasing after her, he returned to Pwyll and said to him, My lord, it's no use on anyone on foot pursuing her. Is that so? Said Pwyll. Go to the court, then, and take the fastest horse you know of, and gallop after her. The man took the fastest horse, and off he went. He reached the level plain and spurred on his horse. But the harder he spurred the horse, the further she was from him. Yet the woman still moved at the same unvarying speed she had moved at before. His horse began to slow down, and when he realized his horse was tired of galloping, he returned to the place where Pwyll was. My lord, he said, it is no use anyone going after that lady. I don't know of a faster horse in the kingdom than this one, but, even so, it was not worth my pursuing her. Is that how it is? Said Pwyll. There's something magic here. We'll go back to the court. And back to the court they went, and so the day passed. The next day they got up and spent the day in the usual way, until it was time to go eat. After the first sitting, Pwyll said, Now then, those of you who were there yesterday can come to the top of the throne again. And you, he said to one of his young men, bring with you the fastest horse you know from the field. So the young man did that. Off they went to the throne, and the horse went with them. While they were sitting there, they saw the woman on the same horse, wearing the same dress, coming along the same road. Here is the same horsewoman as yesterday, said Pwyll. Be ready, lad, to find out who she is. My lord, he said, I will do that gladly. At that the horsewoman came up opposite them. The young man mounted the horse, but before he settled himself properly into the saddle she had gone past him so that there was some distance between them. But she was moving no more quickly than the previous day. So the young man let his horse amble, and was quite confident that he would catch the horsewoman. He was wrong about that. So then he let his horse have its head and quickened it into a gallop. But he drew no closer to her than if his horse were walking. The more he whipped his horse, the further she was from him. When the young man realized that there was no use pursuing her, he came back to the place where Poole was. "My lord," he said, "you saw that this horse galloped as fast as he could." "I saw it was no use your pursuing her," said Poole, "but as God's my witness, that horsewoman must have some business with someone here, if only she were not so obstinate. We'll go to the court." So they returned to the court once more and spent the evening singing and feasting until everyone was well contented. And the next day they whiled away the hours until it was time to go eat. And after eating, Poole said, "Where are those people who have went to the top of the throne yesterday?" "Here we are," they said. "We'll go to the throne again," he said. "And you," he said to his ostler, "settle my horse carefully, and bring it to the road, and bring my spurs with you." And the ostler did that. So they climbed and sat on the throne. They were not there long before they saw the horsewoman coming along the same road as before, looking the same and moving in the same way. "Now, lad," said Poole, "I can see the horsewoman. Bring me my horse." No sooner had Poole mounted than the woman had rode past him. Poole turned after her, gave a great prancing horse its head. He thought he would catch her on the second or third bound, but he was no nearer to her than before. He forced his horse to go as fast as it could, but again he realized it was useless to pursue her. Then Poole finally cried, "Lady, from the sake of the man you love most, wait for me." "I'll wait gladly," she said, "and it would have been far better for the horse if you'd asked that to begin with." The girl drew in her reins and lifted her veil, and looked at Poole and began to talk with him. "My lady," said Poole, "where do you come from, and what is the purpose of your journey?" "To go about my business," she said, "and I'm glad to see you." "Welcome to you," he said. And then Poole thought that the face of every girl and woman he had ever seen was ugly compared to her face. "My lady," he said, "will you tell me about your business?" "Yes, of course," she said. "My most important business is to see you." "As far as I'm concerned," said Poole, "that's the best business you could have. And will you tell me who you are?" "Yes, my lord," she said. "I am Rhiannon, daughter of Hafed the Old, and I am to be given to a man against my will. I have not accepted any husband until now because I'm in love with you, and I will not accept any other husband unless you reject me. I've come here to discover your answer." "As God's my witness," said Poole, "here's my answer. If I had my choice of all the women and girls in the world, you would be my choice." "Fine," she said. "If that's what you will, arrange to meet me before I'm given to another man." "The sooner the better for me," said Poole. "Arrange the meeting where you will." "I'll do that, my lord," she said. "A year from this night I'll arrange for a feast to be prepared for you in the court of Hafed the Old." "Splendid," he said. "I'll be there." "My lord," she said, "take care of yourself, and remember to keep your word. I will be going." Then they parted, and Poole returned to his soldiers and followers, and however much they asked about the girl, he would tell them nothing and would change the subject. The year passed. It was time to go meet Rhiannon. Poole prepared himself, one of 100 horsemen, and away he went to the court of Hafed the Old. When he came to the court he was welcomed warmly. Many people had gathered there. There was rejoicing, the feast was ready, and liberal gifts were given as directed. Then the hall was prepared, and the company went to the tables. Hafed the Old sat on one side of Poole and Rhiannon on the other, and everyone else sat according to his rank. They ate and talked and enjoyed themselves. And at the beginning of the merrymaking after the feast, a tall and regal young man walked into the hall. His hair was auburn and he was dressed in silk. When he reached the dais, he greeted Poole and his friends. "A royal welcome to you, my friend," said Poole. "Seat yourself." "I won't sit," said Poole. "I've a request to make, and I must attend to it." "Do that and welcome," said Poole. "My lord, I have come to make a request of you. Whatever you ask, I'll give it to you if I can." "Oh," said Rhiannon, "why did you answer like that?" "Those were his words, my lady," said the man, "and he has spoken them before noblemen." "Friend," said Poole, "what do you want?" "Tonight you're going to sleep with the woman I love more than anyone. I've come to ask for her and for this wedding feast here." Poole fell silent. There was nothing he could say. "Be quiet as long as you will," said Rhiannon. "No man was ever such a fool as you." "My lady," he said, "I didn't know who he was." "This is the man to whom I was to be given against my will," she said. He is Gwal, son of Clwyd, a wealthy man who has many soldiers. Since you've spoken as you did, give me to him. Otherwise people will make fun of you." "My lady," he said, "what kind of answer is that? I'll never do that." "Give me to him," she said, "and I'll ensure he never has me." "How?" said Poole. "I'll give you a small bag. Keep it safely. When he asks you for the feast and all the wedding preparations, tell him they're not yours to give. Say that I have given this feast to the soldiers and the company. As for me, she said, I'll make an arrangement with him to marry him exactly 1 year from tonight. Now at the end of the year, have this bag with you, and wait with your knights in the orchard up there. While he's in the middle of his merrymaking, come in by yourself in ragged clothes, with this bag in your hand. Ask for nothing except that the bag be filled with food. I'll arrange things so the bag will be no fuller, even if all the food and drink in those 7 regions is poured into it. After a long food and drink has been thrown into the bag, he will ask, will your bag ever be full? You will say, no, not until a very rich and important man will get up and tread down the food in the bag and say, enough has been put in here. Then, said the woman, I'll get Gwal to go and tread on the food in the bag. When he comes, turn the bag so that he is head over heels inside it, and then knot the laces. You'll need to have a loud horn hanging round your neck. When he has been tied inside the bag, sound your horn as a sign to your knights. When they hear the horn, they must attack the court. My lord, said Gwal, it's high time I had your answer about what I've asked for. Whatever is mine you can have entirely, said Poole. Friend, said Rhiannon for her part, I have given this feast and this wedding preparations to the men of Dyfed and the retinue of soldiers in the company here. I'll not allow them to be given to anyone else. But a year from tonight, a feast will be have to prepare it for you, friend, so that you may marry me. And Gwal went to his own country, and Poole went to Dyfed. A year passed until it was time for the feast in the courts of Hafead the Old. Then Gwal, son of Clud, came to the feast that had been prepared for him. He went to the court and was welcomed there. Poole, king of the other world, also came. He went to the orchard with 100 knights, exactly as Rhiannon had instructed, and he had a bag with him. Poole put on ragged clothes and old shabby shoes. When he heard the merrymaking after the eating, he walked into the hall. When he reached the dais, he greeted Gwal and his company of men and women. God's blessing on you and welcome, said Gwal. My lord, he said, may God repay you. I am a man who has some business with you. Welcome to your business, said Gwal, and if you ask for anything reasonable, you're most welcome to it. My request is quite reasonable, my lord, he said. I ask only out of need. What I'd like to have is this bag full of food. You're not asking for much, said Gwal, and you can have that gladly. Bring him food. And a large number of servants got up and began to fill the bag. But in spite of all that was thrown into it, the bag was no fuller than before. Friend, said Gwal, will your bag ever be full? No, as God's my witness, said he, never in spite of all that's been thrown in it. Unless a nobleman who owns lands and riches will get up and tread the food in the bag with his 2 feet, saying, enough has been put in here. And you, my fine man, said Rhiannon to Gwal, get up this instant. Gladly, said Gwal. He got up and put his 2 feet in the bag. Then Poole turned the bag over so that Gwal was head over heels inside it. He drew up the laces and knotted them, and then he sounded the horn. And at that his company of soldiers attacked the court and held all those men who had come with Gwal and put them in chains. And Poole cast off his rags and shabby shoes. As each of the soldiers came to the hall, he gave the bag a kick or a beating with a stick and asked, Who's in there? A badger, the others said. And as each soldier reached the hall, he asked, What's this game you're playing? That's the game of badger in a bag, they would answer. And it was here that the game of badger in a bag was first played. My lord, said the man inside the bag, if you'd listen to me, killing me in a bag is not a worthy death for me. My lord, said Heofed the Old, he's telling the truth, and it's right that you listen to him. That is not a fitting death for him. All right, said Poole, I'll follow your advice to what I should do with him. And then Rhiannon said, I'll give you some advice. You are now in a position where it's your duty to satisfy the people and musicians who ask you and beg you for things. Let him take your place in the giving of gifts, and make him swear that he will never reclaim these gifts from you, nor avenge himself on you, and that will be sufficient to them. He can have all that, said the man from the bag. I'll agree to that gladly, said Poole, if that's the advice of Heofed and Rhiannon. That is our advice, they said. And I will agree to it, said Poole. Now, who will stand witness for Gwal? We'll stand witness until his own men are free, said Heofed. Then Gwal was set free from the bag, and his chief men were unchained. Now ask Gwal for his witness, said Hafed. We know the men he ought to choose. And Hafed counted the witnesses. State your terms, said Gwal. What Rhiannon has said is good enough for me, said Poole. So the witness agreed on these terms. Indeed, my lord, said Gwal, I am hurt. I have sustained great wounds, and I must bathe them and have them dressed. I'll go with your permission, and I'll leave noblemen here to respond on my behalf to the people who petition you. Fine, said Poole, do that. And then Gwal went towards his kingdom. The hall was prepared for Poole and his company, in the company of the court of Hafed the Old, and they all took their places at the table. Each one sat the same place where he was sitting in a year before, and Poole and Rion went to their room and spent their night pleasantly. "My lord," said Rionin at dawn, "get up and distribute the gifts to the musicians, and today don't refuse anyone who asks you for a gift." "I'll do that gladly," said Poole. "Today and for as long as this feast lasts." Poole got up and told the servants to call for silence so that he could invite the musicians and anyone who wanted anything to come forward. He told the company that they could all have whatever they desired, and he was as good as his word. No one was refused anything for as long as the feast lasted, and when the feast came to an end, Poole said to Hephaestus, "My lord, with your permission, I'll start for Dyfed tomorrow." "Fine," said Hephaestus. "God speed you, and arrange for a time for Rionin to follow you." "As God's my witness," said Poole, "we'll go from here together." "Is that what you want, my lord?" said Hephaestus. "Indeed it is," said Poole. The following day they travelled towards Dyfed, and went to the court of Arbeth, where the feast had been prepared for them. A gathering of the important men and women of the country met them. Rionin allowed no one to leave without giving him a beautiful gift, either a brooch or a ring or a precious gem. And they ruled the country happily that year, and the next year. But during the third year people began to look unhappy and sad because they saw the lord they so loved, their own king and foster brother, had no heir. They asked Poole to talk with them and meet them at Presalu in Dyfed. "My lord," they said to Poole, "you're not as young as some of us, and we fear your wife cannot give you an heir. Take another wife so that you may have an heir. You will not," they said to him, "last forever, and though we may be content without an heir, we're not ready to tolerate that." "True enough," said Poole. "We won't be together long, and accidents may happen. But leave the matter with me until the end of the year. We'll meet together 1 year from now, and then I'll follow your advice." This arrangement was accepted. Before the time of the meeting, a son was brought to Poole at Aberth. On the night he was born, and before the time of the meeting, a son was brought to Poole at Aberth. On the night he was born, women were brought in to look after the baby and his mother, but these women fell asleep, and so did Rionin, the son's mother. It happened like this. There were 6 women there, and they kept watch for the first part of the night, but before midnight, each and every one of them had fallen asleep. Towards daybreak they awoke. They looked into the cradle where they placed the baby, but there was no sight of it. "Oh," said the woman, "the baby is gone." "What are we going to do about it?" said another. What? And the rest of them. And one said, "There's a hound's bitch with her puppies here. We'll kill some of the puppies and rub Rionin's face and hands with the blood. Then we'll throw their bones in front of her and swear it was she herself that killed the baby. She won't be able to argue against the 6 of us." They all agreed to this plan. When it was getting light, Rionin woke and asked, "Ah, women, where's the little one?" "My lady," they said, "don't ask us for the little one. We're black and blue all over after struggling with you, and in truth we've never seen such a fighting spirit in any woman. But it was no good. You yourself has destroyed your son, and don't ask us about him." "Poor women," said Rionin. "For the sake of God who knows all things, don't accuse me falsely. God who knows all things knows that you're wronging me. If you are afraid, I swear that I'll defend you." "Indeed," they said, "we are not going to be wrong to shield someone else." "Poor women," said Rionin. "No wrong will come from telling the truth." But whatever she said, with words fair and pitiful, the women only gave her the same reply. Now Poole got up, and so did his soldiers in the company, and the disaster could not be hidden from them. The story spread through the country, and all the noblemen heard it. And the noblemen met and sent messages to Poole, asking him to send away his wife as a punishment for the murder of her baby. "They have only one reason for asking me to send away my wife," said Poole, "and that is if she has no children. But I know that she has a child, and I'll not send her away. And if she has done wrong, then she will have to accept the proper punishment for it." Rionin summoned learned men and wise men to her side. Then she decided she would rather accept her punishment than argue with the women, and the punishment imposed upon her was that she was to stay in that court of Aberth for 7 years. There was a mounting block outside the gates of the court, and she had to sit there every day and tell her story to every passer-by if she thought that they did not already know it. Then she had to offer to carry visitors and pilgrims on her back, any who were willing, into the court. But it was a rare thing for anyone to allow himself to be carried, and this is how she spent part of the time. At this time the Lord of Gwent Iscoed was Tyrone, and he was the best man in the world. In his court there was a mare, and there was nothing in the kingdom, neither horse nor mare, that was more beautiful than she. Every year on the eve of May Day she would give birth to a foal, but no one knew what became of it. Tyrone had a talk with his wife upon evening. "Listen," he said, "we're feeble enough to allow our mare's foals to disappear every year, and to let them all be taken." "What can we do about it?" she asked. "It's the eve of May Day," he said. "May God punish me if I don't find out what evil it is that spirits the foals away." Tyrannon had the mare brought indoors. He armed himself and began to keep watch. Towards the beginning of the night the mare gave birth to a large sturdy foal that immediately stood up on 4 legs. Tyrannon got up and examined the foal, and while he was looking at it he heard a great noise, and after the noise a great claw came through the window of the building and seized the foal by its mane. Tyrannon took his sword and struck off the arm between wrist and elbow, so that part of the arm with the foal in its grasp fell from the building. And then Tyrannon heard a great noise and a shriek together. He opened the door and ran after the noise. He could not see what was causing the noise, because the night was so dark, but he rushed after it and chased it. And he remembered that he had left the door open, and went back. And lying by the door was a little baby wrapped up in silk. He picked up the little baby boy, and saw that he was strong for his age. Tyrannon bolted the door and went into the room where his wife was. "My lady," he said, "are you sleeping?" "No," she replied. "I was asleep, but I woke when you came in." "Here's a baby," he said. "If you want him, something you've never had." "My lord," she said, "where does he come from?" "I'll tell you everything," said Tyrannon, and he told her the whole story. "My lord," she said, "what sorts of clothes is the baby wearing?" "Silk clothes," said Tyrannon. "He is the child of noble people," she said. "My lord, I'd be glad to have a woman speak up and say I gave birth to a child, if that is what you wish." I'd agree readily with you about this," he said, and that is what they did. They had the child baptized and called him Gree the Golden Hair, since what hair there was on his head was as yellow as gold. The child was brought up in court until he was 2 years old. Before he was 1 he was walking well, and he was bigger than a child of 3. That is, a child of 3 who was big for his age. At the end of the 2nd year he was as big as a boy of 6, and before the end of the 4th year he used to implore the grooms to allow him to take the horses to water. "My lord," said his wife to Tyrannon, "where is the foal you saved that night you found the baby?" "I gave him to the grooms and told them to look after him," he said. "My lord, wouldn't it be a good thing for you to have it trained and given to the boy?" she said. "It was on the very night you found the boy that the foal was born, and you saved it." "I've nothing against that," said Tyrannon. "I'll allow you to give it to him." "My lord," she said, "may God reward you. I'll give it to him." And the horse was given to the boy. Tyrannon's wife told the trainers and grooms to take care of the horse and have it trained by the time the boy was old enough to ride, and to bring her regular reports about how the horse was coming on. During this time, Tyrannon and his wife heard the news about Rhiannon and her punishment, and because he had found a baby, Tyrannon had made a point of keeping his ears open and closely questioning travellers. From many of those who came to the court he heard great complaints about Rhiannon's pitiful punishment. Tyrannon thought about this and looked closely at the child. It struck him then that he had never seen a son and father look so alike as the child and Pool, king of the other world. He knew well what Pool looked like, for he had paid homage to him for a number of years. As a result of this, Tyrannon began to worry about how unfair it was for him to keep a boy with him when he knew it was another man's child. On the first occasion he was alone with his wife, he told her that it was not right for them to keep the boy with them, and as a result caused so much pain to so good a lady as Rhiannon, especially as the boy was the child of Pool, king of the other world. Tyrannon's wife agreed to send the boy to Pool. "And we can win 3 things through doing this," she said. "Gratitude and reward for releasing Rhiannon from her punishment, gratitude from Pool for bringing up the boy and taking him back to him, and the third is, if the boy grows to be a man of honor, he will be our foster child, and will do the best he can for us." So they agreed to this. The very next day Tyrannon prepared to take with 2 knights, taking the boy with them as a 4th, and on the horse that the Tyrannon had given him. Then he travelled towards Arbroath, and it did not take them long to get there. When they approached the court they could see Rhiannon sitting by the mounting block. When they drew close to her she called out, "Ah, my lords, go no further. I'll carry each of you on to the court. That's my punishment for killing my own child." "Lady," said Tyrannon, "I don't think that anyone here will allow you to carry them." "Let who will be carried," said the boy. "I shan't." "Indeed," said Tyrannon, "we won't either." And then came to the court and were warmly welcomed. Pool had just returned from travelling around Dyfed and was glad to see Tyrannon. Then they went to the hall to wash and took their places at the table. Tyrannon sat between Pool and Rhiannon, and Tyrannon's 2 friends sat above Pool and the boy between them. Then Tyrannon told his whole story about his mare and the boy, and how they, Tyrannon and his wife, adopted the boy as their own child and brought him up. "And there is your son, lady," said Tyrannon, "and whomever has told a lie about you has done great wrong. When I heard about your punishment, I was sad and began to worry, and I don't think that there is a single person in all this company who will not recognize that this boy is Pool's boy." "There's no one here who doubts it at all," said everyone. "As God's my witness," said Rhiannon, "if that were true, my care would be at an end." "My lady," said Pendra and Dyfed, "you've chosen a good name for your boy. Pryderi, meaning my care. The name that suits him best is Pryderi, son of Pool, king of the other world. It may be that his own name suits him better, said Rhiannon. What name? Asked Penderin Dyfed. Gree Goldenhair is the name we have given him, said Tyronon. Pryderi, said Penderin Dyfed, shall be his name. That is best, said Pool. Shall take the boy's name from the words his mother spoke when she had first good news about him. And they agreed on that. Tyronon, said Pool, God rewards you for bringing up this boy, and if he grows to be a man of honour, it is right that he should repay you. My lord, said Tyronon, no one in the world will be more sad to lose him than the woman who brought him up. It's right he should remember what I and this woman did for him. As God's my witness, said Pool, I'll defend your kingdom for as long as I'm able to defend my own. And if Pryderi himself becomes the king here, it'll be even more fitting for him to protect you than it is for me. Now, if you and all these noblemen here agree, we'll give the child into the care of Penderin Dyfed, and that you'll be his friends and foster parents. That is a fine proposal, said everyone. So the boy was given to Penderin Dyfed, and the noblemen of the country came to keep him company. Then Tyron left with his friends for his own country, with love and joy. He did not go without being offered the most beautiful gems and the best horses and dogs, but he accepted nothing. Then they all lived in their kingdoms, and Pryderi, son of Pool, king of the other world, was brought up with care as he deserved, until he was the most handsome and comely and skilled young man in the kingdom. They lived in that way for 1 year after another, until the life of Pool, king of the other world, came to an end, and he died. Then Pryderi ruled successfully over the 7 regions of Dyfed, loved in his kingdom and by everyone about 4 regions of Ceredigion. And these are called the 7 regions of Celtic. And Pryderi, king of Pool, king of the other world, busied himself with these conquests until he thought about taking a wife. And the woman he chose was Sigfa, daughter of Gawain the Resplendent, from the very best family of this island. And that is how the branch of the Mabinogi ends. And that is the first story that I have for you today, gentle listeners. The last 2 are fairly short, but they are no less memorable. This next one I will tell you is an Irish tale that features the goddess Masha, who is known as one of a trinity of goddesses, meant to symbolize war and fertility, and possesses the power to bestow and to take away. There once was a man of Ulster named Crundon. He was a farmer and a good man, but he had had a terrible misfortune. His wife had died, leaving him with 3 young children and no way to take care of them. His house was in disarray, and every day he had to get up and leave his young children on their own to go and work in the fields, knowing that this was no way for them to be raised. But he had no other option. What else was there to do? One day, when he returned home from work, Crundon opened the door, expecting to see the usual shambles. A dirty kitchen, unhappy children, and nothing but a cold fire. To his astonishment, the exact opposite was true. The house was cleaned, fresh, and neat as a pin. The children, too, were recently washed and quiet and happy. And there was a beautiful woman sitting by a roaring fire, cooking a delicious-smelling dinner. The woman turned to him and said that her name was Masha, and that she had decided to be his wife. She was a beautiful woman, and there was something strange about her, but in a good way. And Crundon, not one to argue with such a wonderful moment of fortune, settled into a newly married life. For a while, they were happy. Masha was a perfect wife to him, keeping the house clean and the children happy, and taking perfect care of Crundon. He knew she was a woman of the other world by the way she moved. She could run so swiftly that her feet barely touched the ground. But she never made any fuss of this herself, only going about her business as a wife and mother. So Crundon also let it be, and there was no speak of the strange mystery and otherworldly nature of his wife between them. One day, however, the king of Ulster summoned all his people together for a feast to celebrate his purchase of a fine new team of chariot horses. Crundon was excited to go, but Masha took him aside and warned him that above all else he must not speak of her, He must not boast about her. If he did so, he would bring disaster upon them. Crundon gave her his word. He would not speak a single word of her, and away to the king's feast he went. The new horses that the king had purchased were indeed beautiful, grey and swift, and perfectly matched, and the feast was a glorious one, showing King Conor's great generosity. Crundon ate and drank along with all the other people at the feast, but he remembered Masha's warning, and when the other men began boasting of the beauty of their wives, he kept his mouth shut. When the other men started boasting about the cooking of their wives, Crundon bit his tongue. But it was when the king himself boasted that no creature in Ireland was as fast as his new horses, Crundon could not keep quiet any longer, and bragged aloud that his wife was so swift she would beat the king's horses in a race. Stung by this, King Conor ordered his men to seize the boastful farmer. He demanded that Crundon send for his wife, and that if she did not come to prove the truth of his statement, Crundon would pay for his lie with his life. Men were sent to Crundon's household, but when Masha opened the door, they could see that she was heavily pregnant. Nevertheless, they told her what her husband had said, and that if she did not make good her boast, he would pay for it with his life. Masha agreed to go with them, but with a very bad grace. When she appeared before the king, Masha begged him to consider her condition and postpone the race until after she had given birth and had had time to recover. But the king had been brooding on the insult Crundon had given him, and he refused her plea. Masha turned to all the warriors of Ulster, the Craboa Rua, or Red Branch, assembled there, and asked them to intercede, to protect her. She reminded them that each and every one was born of a woman, and that it was not right for them to put her in this position. But none of them stepped forward. None of them would plead with the king. They had been drinking at the feast. They were eager to see this race, and see their king put the boastful farmer in his place. Something about Masha must have given King Conor pause, because before the race he had his charioteer strip back all the decorations of the chariot, all the cushions and all the cloths that made the ride easier, till the king's chariot was barely a plank of wood, with wheels as light as could possibly be. He then stripped off his armor and a heavy cloak, till he stood in his lightest linen tunic, and assembled his sister, Deirdre, who was his charioteer, and took the reins of the chariot himself. Masha waited until all this was done, and at last the race was about to be commenced. The race itself was to be held on the grass outside of the king's fort, where there were no stones or uneven ground to trip the horses or foul the wheels. All the men of Ulster gathered there to watch, and the race began. The king raced his matched horses, and they ran as swift as the wind, moving in perfect unison, pulling him so fast that he felt he was flying. But if the king raced as fast as the wind, Masha ran faster. She outpaced the wind itself. Her feet seemed to barely touch the ground. But as she ran, the birth pains came on Masha, and she began to scream. All the people watching felt suddenly that this was not the great sport and entertainment that they thought it was. Screaming in agony, Masha ran the course and crossed the finish line with her belly protruding in front of the noses of Conor's horses. Then, having won the race, she collapsed onto the ground, and in a rush of blood, her twins were born. Now this is where the story may vary. According to some myths, her twins were born healthy and full of life. But Masha herself fell down dead. However, in some versions, the opposite is true. It was her twins who were born still and dead, while Masha herself still lived. In this regard, Masha gathered up the twins into her arms, and either with her dying breath or with living fury, she put a curse on all of the warriors of Ulster. For failing to use their strength to defend her in her time of need, Masha declared that their strength would become useless to them. Whenever they needed it most, their strength would desert them, and for 9 days and 9 nights, they would endure the pains of a woman in childbirth. This curse would last for 9 generations, each fighting man of Ulster, as soon as he was old enough to grow a beard, would come under the curse. Now with that, Masha, holding her twins in her arms, either died or she gathered her dead twins and leapt off over the heads of those watching, running off into the distance, never to be seen again. And from that day forward, the fort of the King of Ulster was known as Emain Masha, the twins of Masha. A very sad tale, and one to be considered. Don't mess with a pregnant lady for a number of reasons. Regardless, we have one more tale. This one again is Welsh, and is a personal favorite of one of our Hopkinton Libraries, Nia, who was very kind enough to share many of these books with me. But before we get to that, the keyword for the day. The keyword for the day is Rhiannon, or Rhiannon, considered a Welsh goddess, known for her riding through the known for being a horse goddess and a very, very wise political figure in mythology. All capitals now. You spell it. Capital R, capital H, capital A, capital R, capital H, capital I, capital A, capital N, capital N, capital O, capital N. So Rhiannon. Rhiannon. Enter that in to your Hopkinton Public Library summer reading account, and you just may win a fabulous prize. Now, a last story for the day. A short one, a sad one, but a well-known one. One of the best known and loved folk tales of Wales is the story of a faithful hound. This is the tale of the legend of Geralt the dog. In the 13th century, Prince Llewellyn the Great had a palace in Belgelert in Caernarvonshire, and the prince was known through all the land as a remarkable hunter. He spent so much of his time in the surrounding countryside, hunting rabbits and deer and foxes, all along the sides of his many, many hunting dogs. But it was his favorite, Gellert, who was dearest to him, and the strongest and the bravest of them all. One day, as the prince gathered his hunting dogs, summoning them as usual with his horn, Gellert did not appear, no matter how much he called. So regretfully, the prince had to go on his hunting trip without him. The hunt was largely successful, though not as successful as it would have been if Gellert had been at the prince's side. But regardless, when the prince returned from the hunt, he was greeted by Gellert, who came bounding up towards him, except his jowls were dripping with blood. The prince was terrified, and a horrible sinking feeling set into his gut. On his suspicion, he stepped into his child's nursery, and there was an upturned cradle. The walls splattered with blood, and Gellert standing near. The prince searched everywhere for the child, but he could not find him, and the prince was certain that Gellert had killed his child, his son. Mad with grief, acting on instinct, the prince pulled out his sword and plunged it deep into Gellert's heart. The dog howled a terrible death agony, and at this exact same time, the prince heard a child's cry coming from underneath the upturned cradle. Lifting it up, he found his son, completely unharmed, but lying beside an enormous dead wolf that covered in the bite marks of a dog. Gellert had protected his lord's son and had been killed as a reward, and as a reward for his bravery, had been slain by his beloved lord. The prince was horrified at what he had done. Struck with remorse, he lifted the body of his faithful dog and brought it outside the castle walls and buried him in a grand ceremony where everyone could see the grave of this brave animal and hear the story of his valiant fight with the wolf. To this day, a cairn of stones still marks the place, and the name Bedgeralt means in Welsh, the grave of Geralt. Every year, thousands of people visit the grave of the brave dog and pay respects to his mighty deeds. Whether Geralt was real or not, that's up for you to decide. Regardless, it shows the weight of loyalty, the depth of friendship, even in the face of ungratefulness. And that is all the stories I have for you today, gentle listener. Come back next time for the next installment in the series where we dive into another culture and its many, many tales. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Please be well, and I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.